The air inside the main assembly hall of Croft Industries hung thick with the metallic tang of ozone and a faint, acrid undertone I couldn't immediately place. It was a sterile, unforgiving environment, all polished concrete and exposed conduits, a monument to efficiency that now felt profoundly violated. My boots echoed hollowly as I crossed the cavernous space, the sound swallowed by the oppressive quiet that follows sudden violence. A uniformed officer stood near a cluster of caution tape, his face grim under the harsh industrial lighting. "Dr. Finch," he greeted, his voice hushed. "The lead detective is waiting." I nodded, my gaze already sweeping past him, absorbing the details. This was the domain of Alan Croft, the tech entrepreneur whose innovations had redefined digital security. Now it was his tomb. The reported cause: a fall from one of the elevated gantries, a plunge onto the very factory floor he'd engineered. The detective, a man whose weary eyes held decades of grim familiarity, gestured toward the roped-off area. "Morning, Marcus. Another unfortunate accident, it seems. Body's over there. Fell about 30 feet, according to the on-site team." I approached the scene with my usual deliberate pace, my eyes tracing the trajectory, mapping the impact zone. The body lay partially obscured by a crumpled piece of machinery, a testament to the force of the impact. Even from a distance, I could discern the unnatural angle of a limb, the way the fabric of the expensive suit clung to a collapsed chest. "Any witnesses?" I asked, my voice low, my focus absolute. The detective shook his head. "Night shift, automated systems mostly. A few technicians heard the crash, but no one saw him go over. Security footage is being reviewed, but initial reports suggest a blind spot at that specific gantry." A blind spot. Convenient. I filed the thought away, a tiny burr in the back of my mind. My work required me to be a dispassionate observer, a reader of bones. But the narrative surrounding death often spoke volumes even before I touched the deceased. I donned my gloves, the thin latex a second skin, and knelt beside the remains. The scent was faint, metallic, but not purely sanguine. There was something else, almost burnt. I ignored the nausea that always threatened to rise, focusing instead on the task at hand. The primary impact point was clear: the concrete floor, unforgiving. The head trauma was extensive, consistent with a fall of that height. Ribs were fractured, a femur snapped. Classic blunt force trauma. But as I began my more detailed external examination, sifting through the layers of clothing and contorted flesh, my fingers encountered something that caused me to pause. I gently palpated the left humerus, just above the elbow. There was a distinct, sharp edge, a break. It was a spiral fracture, a type of break often associated with twisting force, not a direct impact. A fall, especially one from a height, typically resulted in compression fractures, linear breaks, or comminuted fractures, shattered bone from immense force. A spiral fracture, on the other hand, suggested rotation, torsion. My brow furrowed. I ran my gloved fingers along the bone again, confirming the assessment. This wasn't right. A fall of 30 feet onto concrete would produce a catastrophic array of injuries, certainly, but this specific fracture felt anomalous. "Marcus?" the detective prompted, noticing my prolonged stillness. "The humerus," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "Left arm. Spiral fracture." He leaned closer, his expression unreadable. "What does that mean?" "It means," I began, carefully articulating each word, "that while the other injuries are consistent with a fall, this particular fracture is not typical. A spiral fracture implies a twisting force applied to the limb before or during the impact, not just the impact itself." My mind raced, assembling possibilities. Could he have flailed, twisted, caught himself on something? Possible, but the clean nature of the spiral suggested a concentrated force. And why just that one? The rest of the skeletal trauma was classic. Could it be from landing awkwardly? The detective suggested. Perhaps, I conceded, though my internal skepticism was growing. But the degree of torsion required for such a break, in conjunction with a 30-foot fall, it's a detail worth noting. It's a point of inconsistency. I continued my meticulous work, photographing the remains from every angle, collecting trace evidence. The scene, the injuries, the victim's profile. Alan Croft was not just any entrepreneur. He was a titan, a man with powerful enemies and equally powerful friends. This wasn't just an accident anymore. This was a puzzle, a carefully constructed illusion. As I documented the scene, the lead investigator received a call. He spoke in hushed tones, his gaze darting between me and the victim. When he hung up, his face was tighter. Croft was apparently in the middle of some major legal wrangling, he informed me, his voice low. His corporate counsel just called. They're requesting access to an offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes, claiming urgent business. Something about securing proprietary data related to his estate. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Proprietary data, estate, urgent business. It felt less like a legal formality and more like a frantic attempt to control a narrative. My initial unease solidified into a cold certainty. Alan Croft hadn't simply fallen. Someone had made sure he did, and they were already moving to erase the tracks. This was no accident. This was a meticulously planned execution, and the bones were beginning to tell their story. The words from the detective still echoed, rattling around my skull like loose change. The official story of an accidental fall was already crumbling, not under the weight of evidence, but under the pressure of too many convenient coincidences. My dedicated examination station, nestled deep within the old manufacturing plant now repurposed for forensic work, felt like a sterile island in a sea of forgotten industry. The air was cool, filtered, carrying only the faint metallic tang of the cleaning agents I preferred. Beneath the harsh glare of the articulated lamps, the remains of the tech entrepreneur lay on the stainless steel table. The air conditioning unit hummed a low, steady drone, the only sound breaking the silence save for the rustle of my gloves and the precise click of my instruments. I began my work methodically, as always. The preliminary external examination had already been performed at the scene. But here, under controlled conditions, I could delve deeper. The superficial injuries were consistent with a significant fall. Extensive bruising, abrasions, and several open wounds from impact with various surfaces. The clothing, now carefully cataloged and bagged, had shown tears and scuffs that aligned with a chaotic descent. A casual observer, even a seasoned investigator, would have chalked it up to gravity's brutal hand. But I wasn't a casual observer. I started with the cranium, gently manipulating the scalp away from the bone, a task requiring both precision and a delicate touch. The impact point on the left temporal region was evident, a stellate fracture radiating outward, undoubtedly the primary cranial trauma from the fall. But it was what lay beneath, or rather around it, that captured my attention. I used a fine-toothed probe, tracing the hairline fractures. They spider-webbed, yes, but not uniformly. My fingers, accustomed to the subtle language of bone, detected a slight, almost imperceptible swelling along the posterior aspect of the skull, near the occipital protuberance. This area, less exposed in a direct frontal or lateral impact from a fall, felt different. I adjusted the lamp, bringing its intense beam to bear. Under the magnification, the tiny, almost invisible fissures came into sharp relief. These weren't the clean, sharp breaks of a high-energy impact, but rather a series of compressed microfractures, like compacted dust on a fragile surface. They fanned out from a central point, forming a pattern that spoke of localized blunt force, not the widespread trauma of a fall. The periosteum, the membrane covering the bone, showed minute tears, suggesting a strike that had compressed the tissue without necessarily causing a gaping wound. This was a pre-mortem event, I was certain. The bone had reacted, attempted to heal in the immediate aftermath, however briefly. I moved to the cervical spine, my gloved fingers exploring the delicate architecture of the neck. The upper vertebrae, particularly the atlas and axis, often bore the brunt of a severe fall, exhibiting compression fractures or even dislocation. Here, however, I found something subtler. Not a complete fracture, but a distinct area of localized stress, a minute greenstick fracture on the spinous process of the C2 vertebra. It was a partial break, where the bone had bent and cracked on one side, but not entirely separated. This type of fracture required a very specific, sharp, localized force, not the diffuse, crushing impact of a body plummeting onto a hard surface. It suggested a sudden, violent hyperextension or hyperflexion, an isolated trauma distinct from the fall itself. My internal monologue shifted from observation to interpretation. The stellate fracture on the temporal bone was the fall. The microfractures on the occipital, the greenstick fracture on C2. These were something else entirely. These were the telltale signs of a targeted impact, delivered before the fall, or perhaps even causing it. Someone had struck the victim, likely from behind, with an object that delivered a precise, focused blow to the back of the head or neck. The force wasn't enough to immediately incapacitate or kill, but certainly enough to disorient, to compromise balance, to initiate a fall that would then obscure the true origin of the trauma. My jaw tightened. This wasn't an accident. This was an act of violence meticulously disguised. The perpetrator hadn't just pushed the entrepreneur. They had used a specific, calculated blow to ensure the subsequent fall looked accidental, a final, brutal flourish in a sophisticated cover-up. I had found the crack in their carefully constructed narrative. Now, I just needed to pry it open. The low hum of the laminar flow hood was the only sound in my examination room, a steady white noise that usually lulled me into a meditative focus. Alan Croft's remains lay before me, meticulously arranged on the sterile steel table, each fragment a piece of a puzzle I was determined to solve. The official report, still sitting on my desk, claimed a fall. My gut, however, whispered a different story. I leaned closer, adjusting the magnification on the stereo microscope. The occipital bone, specifically the region near the lambdoid suture, swam into sharp relief. My initial assessment at the scene had been quick, limited by environmental factors. Here, under controlled lighting, the truth began to etch itself into clarity. There were indeed microfractures, not the radiating explosive pattern one would expect from a high-impact fall onto a hard, flat surface. Instead, these were localized, almost imprinted. I rotated the fragment, angling it to catch the light. 6 of them, arranged in a tight, almost perfect hexagonal pattern, each no wider than a pencil lead. This wasn't a random impact. This was a targeted strike, delivered with precision and a specific tool. The edges of the depressions were sharp, almost too clean, indicating a hard, unyielding object. It was as if someone had pressed a miniature hexagonal punch into the bone. The surrounding tissue, what little remained, showed no significant tearing or bruising consistent with a broad surface impact. This was focal trauma, an application of force designed to incapacitate, perhaps even kill, without leaving obvious large-scale signs. My breath hitched. The bone hadn't just cracked, it had been imprinted. The hexagonal pattern was undeniable. A specialized wrench, perhaps? Or a custom-machined component from one of Croft's many tech projects? The implications were chilling. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate act, executed with a specific implement, designed to leave a minimal yet distinctive signature. The fall, then, was a smokescreen, a theatrical flourish to obscure a calculated, brutal act. Croft had been incapacitated, likely killed, before his body plunged from that scaffolding. I pulled back from the microscope, the room suddenly feeling too small, the air too thick. My suspicion had just solidified into a grim certainty. A knock at the door startled me. "Marcus, got a minute?" It was the detective, holding a clear evidence bag containing a sleek, minimalist personal device, a model I recognized as one of Croft's own company's prototypes. "Come in," I said, gesturing to the chair opposite my observation console. I powered down the microscope, the image of the hexagonal impressions still burned into my mind's eye. "You're just in time. I have a confirmation for you." The detective raised an eyebrow, his gaze falling on the bones. "About Croft's demise?" "Precisely," I affirmed. "The trauma to the occipital bone is inconsistent with a fall. These are not random. They suggest a specific hard object was used to strike him. This man was incapacitated, if not killed, by a targeted blow before he ever hit the ground." A muscle twitched in the detective's jaw. "A targeted blow. You're saying it was staged?" "I am," I confirmed, my voice firm. "The fractures are too localized, too precise. Someone intended to make it look like an accident, but they overlooked the minute details. The object likely caused a concussive injury, perhaps a subarachnoid hemorrhage, which would have been difficult to detect without a thorough examination like this." The detective nodded slowly, absorbing my words. He placed the evidence bag on the table. "This might help us piece together the who and why. It's Croft's personal comms device. He was found it tucked away, almost hidden, beneath a loose floorboard near the scaffolding base. It's heavily encrypted, but my forensics team managed to bypass the initial lock. There's something odd on it." I took the device, its cold metal casing a stark contrast to the organic fragments I'd just examined. "Odd how?" "There's a hidden partition," the detective explained, leaning forward. "Not just encrypted, but obfuscated. It took them hours to even find it. And the metadata suggests it was accessed, then re-encrypted just hours before his death. The file names within are gibberish, random strings of alphanumeric characters. But the sheer volume and the recency of the activity are unusual for a device that, according to his colleagues, he rarely used for sensitive work. My fingers traced the smooth surface of the device. A hidden partition. Accessed just before he died, filled with scrambled data. That's not odd, detective. That's a red flag waving in a hurricane. "My thoughts exactly," he agreed. "And here's where it gets interesting. While my team was digging into the device, I received an update from the financial investigator. They've been looking into Croft's recent business dealings, particularly a sudden and unexplained shift of a substantial portion of his assets. They're notorious for handling opaque financial transactions." "Ah," the words from the detective still echoed, rattling around my skull like loose change. This wasn't just a murder. It was an elaborate, calculated operation, one that spoke of deep-seated motives and a meticulous cover-up. The tension in the room thickened, a palpable weight pressing down. I looked from the bone fragments to the sleek device in my hand. Someone had not only wanted Alan Croft dead, but they wanted his secrets buried with him. And they were going to great lengths to ensure they stayed that way. But the hexagonal impression, and now this data anomaly, were threads I intended to pull until the entire tapestry unraveled. I'd spent the last 36 hours in my lab, the smell of bone dust and disinfectant clinging to my clothes, meticulously documenting every microfracture, every unusual stress point. My findings were irrefutable. I walked into the precinct's briefing room, the fluorescent hum a dull throb against my temples. The detective sat at the head of the long table, a half-empty mug steaming beside his elbow, his gaze fixed on the blank whiteboard. A junior officer sat taking notes, occasionally glancing at the detective with an almost reverential deference. The air was thick with stale coffee and unspoken questions. "Marcus," the detective acknowledged, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "You've been quiet. I take it that means you found something." His tone was flat, resigned, as if he already knew the answer and dreaded the paperwork it would entail. I placed my tablet on the polished surface, its screen displaying a high-resolution 3D reconstruction of the victim's humerus. more than something. The initial assessment of a fall from height is inaccurate. Grossly so, in fact. I tapped the screen, highlighting a spiral fracture near the distal end of the bone. This isn't consistent with an impact from a terminal fall. The torsion involved, the specific shear forces required, they point to a struggle. A violent twist, inflicted while the arm was braced. The detective leaned forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the image. A struggle? Precisely. And it's not isolated. Look here. I swiped to another view, focusing on the clavicle. A green stick fracture. Suggests a forceful lateral impact. This is more akin to a strike, or being violently shoved against a hard, unyielding surface. My finger traced the delicate, incomplete break. And then there's the skull. I brought up the next image, a cross-section of the cranium. The subarachnoid hemorrhage? Yes, that's consistent with the final impact. But observe the hairline fracture just above the right temporal lobe. It's a linear fracture, shallow, almost imperceptible without advanced imaging. It occurred before the fatal impact. A glancing blow, perhaps with a blunt object, or a fall against an edge, preceding the main event. The junior officer stopped writing. The detective pushed his mug aside. So, he didn't just fall. No, I confirmed, my voice unwavering. He was assaulted. The injuries tell a story of a struggle, a blow to the head, and then a final fatal impact. The fall was a consequence, not the cause. These are the injuries of a homicide. A tense silence filled the room. The detective scrubbed a hand over his face, his gaze distant. A homicide. This changes everything. He looked at me, a flicker of grudging respect in his eyes. All right, Marcus, you've given us a new direction. We'll reopen this as a murder investigation. He turned to the junior officer. Get the team ready. We're going back to the site and we're going over everything with a fine-tooth comb. No detail too small. We've already started digging into Croft's affairs based on the initial red flags, the detective continued, turning back to me. His business, his personal life. And now, with your findings, a few names are moving rapidly up the list. He pulled a folder towards him, flipping it open. First, his estranged wife, Eleanor. High society, known for her expensive tastes. They were in the midst of a particularly bitter divorce. She stands to inherit a substantial portion of his estate. A very substantial portion, now that the acquisition was on the cusp of closing. I made a mental note. Inheritance. A classic motive, as old as time. Then there's Julian Vance, the detective went on, tapping a photo in the folder. The image showed a sharp-featured man in a tailored suit, a predatory glint in his eyes. Croft's primary business rival. Vance's company was neck and neck with Croft's, and Croft was about to acquire it. Vance stood to lose everything, or gain a foothold, depending on how you look at it. He was under immense pressure, and a known hothead. I considered the two profiles. The estranged wife, motivated by money and perhaps spite, capable of orchestrating a quiet, insidious plot. The business rival, driven by ambition and desperation, perhaps more prone to a violent, impulsive act. Both scenarios fit the forensic evidence in different ways. The detective shook his head. Not yet. These are our primary focuses. Eleanor's alibi is shaky. A spa retreat, alone. Vance was at a conference, but there are gaps in his timeline. He closed the folder with a decisive snap. We're going to lean on them. Hard. The simplicity of an accident had been a comfortable lie. Now the complexity of human malice, greed, and desperation was laid bare. My work wasn't finished. It had only just begun. The cold knot in my stomach tightened, a tangible anchor dragging me deeper into the murky waters of this investigation. The puzzle pieces, once so neatly arranged for an industrial accident, had shattered and reformed, revealing a darker, more complex image. It wasn't just a fall. It was a brutal, calculated act. And the financial implications, the high-stakes world of the victim, Julian Vance, pointed to something beyond simple rage. It pointed to concealment, to a deliberate obfuscation of truth. "The financial records," I stated, my voice cutting through the hum of the forensics van, startling the driver. "They need a deep dive. Not just his personal accounts, but his company's. We've got a warrant for a few places, including one of Vance's known interests." That was it. The missing piece of the geographical puzzle. It wasn't the gleaming glass tower I'd envisioned, but a nondescript, brutalist concrete structure nestled amidst a cluster of similar buildings. Inside, the atmosphere was a bizarre blend of sterile efficiency and frantic activity. Uniformed officers were everywhere, their movements stark against the muted tones of the office furniture. Desks, surprisingly sparse, held only monitors and sleek, silent keyboards. The scent of ozone and stale coffee hung in the air. I watched as a digital forensic specialist, his face illuminated by the glow of a laptop screen, pointed excitedly to something for the detective. "We found it, Detective Miller," the specialist announced, his voice tight with discovery. "A back door, embedded deep within their system. It was siphoning data, proprietary schematics, client lists, even some of Julian Vance's personal communications, directly to a server. And that server? It traces back to a shell company, but the digital fingerprints lead right to Julian Vance's own company network. An inside job, looks like." Miller's tired eyes brightened. He clapped the specialist on the shoulder. "Excellent work. So, industrial espionage? Maybe a disgruntled employee trying to frame him?" I observed the exchange, my hands tucked into my pockets. The detective's enthusiasm was palpable. He had a lead, a tangible path forward, something concrete in the nebulous world of high-tech crime. I walked over, my gaze sweeping past the bustling officers, past the frantic digital specialist, to a stack of industrial-sized shred bins, their contents a confetti of shredded documents. Nearby, a bank of imposing locked safes gleamed dully under the fluorescent lights. "Marcus," Miller acknowledged, turning to me. "What do you make of this? Looks like Vance was either being robbed blind by his own people, or he was orchestrating something far more complex." I leaned closer to the specialist's screen. The code was intricate, professionally executed. It looked legitimate, a genuine cyber heist in progress. But the timing, the convenient discovery. My gut churned with a familiar unease. "It's certainly compelling, Detective," I conceded, my voice measured. "A clear digital footprint, a motive for corporate sabotage, perhaps even a reason for a confrontation that escalated. It fits the profile of a high-stakes business rivalry or internal betrayal." Miller nodded, pleased. "Right. We'll follow this thread. Get warrants for Vance's internal servers. Interview key personnel. This could be our motive, Marcus." But my eyes kept drifting to the physical space around us. The immaculate floors, the precise angles of the furniture, the way the shred bins were placed almost strategically near the entrance, as if to broadcast their purpose. It felt too clean, too perfect. "And the physical evidence?" I asked, turning back to Miller. "The bone fractures, the impact patterns. Are we correlating those with this new digital narrative?" Miller waved a dismissive hand. "We'll get there. But this gives us a direction. A why. A why was good. A how was crucial. But a misdirection could be fatal. The digital anomaly, while undeniably real, felt like a meticulously placed signpost, pointing us down a winding, complex road that ultimately led away from the true destination. "Perhaps," I finally said, the word tasting like ash. But I've seen enough sophisticated cover-ups to know that the most obvious trail is often the one laid out for you to find. The excitement of the cybercrime angle had taken root, firmly embedding itself in the investigative narrative. I understood the appeal. It offered a clear, actionable path. But my own path, the one illuminated by the subtle language of bone and tissue, was diverging sharply. This digital trail, this elaborate cybercrime, was a red herring. My job was to peel back the layers of that deception, to see beyond the digital smokescreen, and listened to the silent, undeniable testimony of the victim's remains. The real story wasn't on a server. It was etched in bone. Back in the sanctuary of my lab, surrounded by the quiet intensity of dedicated colleagues, I felt a familiar clarity return. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, a faint glow from the screen illuminating her face. "Still processing the elemental analysis, Marcus," she responded, her voice low. "But there's something unusual. Not a typical impact signature for a fall, even a severe one. The edges are too clean, too precise." I nodded, adjusting my own microscope to scrutinize a hairline crack on a section of the femur. My initial suspicion was solidifying into conviction. This wasn't an accident. Let's get the SEM on that. I want a full topographical scan of the impact surface and a precise elemental breakdown of any residue, I instructed. Pay particular attention to any metallic traces, no matter how minute. The lab, usually a place of quiet contemplation, now thrummed with a heightened sense of purpose. The analyst moved with practiced efficiency, preparing the samples for the scanning electron microscope. Its powerful beam would reveal details imperceptible to the optical lens, peeling back layers of information hidden within the bone structure. Minutes stretched into an hour, then another, punctuated only by the soft clicks of equipment and the occasional murmured observation. The air grew thick with anticipation. Finally, Anya called out, "Marcus, you need to see this." I moved to her station, leaning over her shoulder as she brought up the SEM results. The image on the screen was a landscape of the bone's surface, rendered in stark black and white. At the epicenter of one of the smaller fractures, a distinct pattern emerged. It wasn't the irregular abrasion of concrete or the random splintering from a broad impact. This isn't random. A tool, not a blunt object, not a fist, not a fall onto a jagged edge. And the elemental analysis confirmed my growing suspicion. "Metallic residue?" I prompted. "Yes," she confirmed, pulling up another graph. "A complex alloy, high in tungsten with traces of cobalt and chromium. Very hard, very durable. Not common. Definitely not something you'd find in everyday construction materials or a typical weapon." My mind raced, sifting through databases of industrial tools, specialized equipment, anything that could leave such a distinct, precise mark and deposit such an alloy. The pattern, the composition, it spoke of intent, of specialized knowledge. This wasn't an improvised act of violence. This was calculated. "The striations," I murmured, leaning closer to the screen. "They're too uniform, too perfect. This wasn't a bludgeon. This was designed to create a specific kind of damage. And the force application," Anya added. "Extremely localized, yet with enough power to cause these internal fractures without significant external bruising. It's almost like a precision punch, but with a cutting or scoring edge. A custom-made tool." The words formed in my mind, cold and sharp. Someone had gone to considerable lengths, not just to kill, but to do so with a specific instrument, designed perhaps to inflict damage in a way that mimicked an accident, or to achieve a particular effect on the body. This wasn't a standard knife, or gun, or even a baseball bat. This was something engineered. The implications were profound. A killer with access to or the ability to commission such a specialized device. What kind of person? What kind of motive? My gaze drifted from the screen, past the busy lab, and settled on the notice board where a printout of the victim's corporate profile was tacked up. A tech entrepreneur. Highly successful, innovative, but also known for aggressive business dealings. People like him often had complex financial structures, layers of protection, and secrets buried deep. I thought of the detective, consumed by his digital leads. While digital footprints could be erased, a physical tool left undeniable evidence. This custom tool, designed for precision and stealth, pointed to a meticulously planned act. It wasn't about a sudden impulse. It was about execution. And execution, especially in the high-stakes world of a tech mogul, often revolved around assets, intellectual property, and leverage. And where did such high-stakes dealings often lead? To places designed for secrecy, for the intricate weaving of financial webs. The thought solidified. This custom tool wasn't just a weapon. It was a key, unlocking a deeper, more intricate conspiracy. My focus on the bone fragments had given me more than just the cause of death. It had given me a glimpse into the killer's meticulous mind and, perhaps, their ultimate objective. The detective might be chasing ghosts in the machine, but I now had a very real, very physical lead. A dangerous one. The custom-made tool. Its existence gnawed at me, a sliver of precision in a case designed to appear chaotic. I spent the better part of the next morning hunched over my workbench, staring at the high-resolution images of the bone fractures, comparing them to the microscopic impressions left by the instrument. The edges were too clean for a random impact, the angles too deliberate for a simple fall. This wasn't a hammer or a pry bar. It was something specialized, crafted for a specific, intricate purpose. The mark suggested a tool with a narrow, slightly curved tip, hardened but not brittle, capable of delivering focused force without significant collateral damage. My mind scrolled through industries, watchmaking, dentistry, intricate lockpicking, even certain types of surgical instruments. Though I immediately dismissed the last, given the explicit prohibitions on such contexts. Then it hit me. A memory from a peripheral conversation weeks ago with the investigating detective about the victim's inner circle. Alan Croft. Her family ran a high-end antique restoration business. Antique restoration. My fingers tapped the desk. These artisans often commissioned bespoke tools, instruments designed to manipulate delicate materials, to remove aged lacquer or reshape intricate filigree without marring the surrounding surface. They required precision, strength, and a unique form factor. The very description matched the signature I'd found on the victim's remains. Don't tell me it's a spork. It's not. It's a custom-fabricated instrument, likely from a specialized trade. The fracture patterns are consistent with a tool designed for delicate but forceful manipulation, not blunt trauma. Think antique restoration, fine metalwork, things that require specific, non-standard implements. There was a beat of silence on his end. Antique restoration, he echoed. The words slow, heavy. Eleanor Croft's family business. Precisely. I need to re-examine the alibis, specifically hers. An hour later, I was seated across from Detective Miller in his cramped office, the air thick with stale coffee and the hum of fluorescent lights. He'd pulled up the initial interviews, scrolling through digital files. Eleanor Croft, he stated, pointing at a screen, claims he was at a family estate upstate, supervising a restoration project. Left the city the day before the incident, returned the day after. Her alibi was corroborated by 2 of her employees and her cousin. Too neat, I murmured, leaning closer to the screen. What kind of restoration? What were they working on? An 18th century French cabinet, apparently. Intricate marquetry, delicate bronze mounts. Miller's brow furrowed. They'd need specialized tools for that, wouldn't they? Absolutely. And the kind of tools that could be adapted, or specifically made, to inflict the damage I observed. The question isn't whether he was there, but what exactly he was doing. And if he had a window, however small, to return to the city unnoticed, or to have someone else use such a tool. We pored over the details. Her journey, the estimated travel time, the lack of digital footprints for her vehicle during a critical 6-hour window. Her alibi accounted for her physical presence at the estate, but it didn't account for the tool's presence or its potential absence for a brief period. The flaw wasn't in her location, but in the assumption that her location precluded the means. Her cousin corroborated her story about being at the estate the entire time, Miller noted, rubbing his temples. Said they were working side by side, long hours. How long is long hours? I pressed. Did they take breaks? Were they ever out of each other's sight? Even an hour, 2 hours could be enough. Enough to travel, to act, to return, or enough to arrange for the tool to be used by another and returned. The detective sighed, a slow, drawn-out sound. This means we have to lean into the motive again. Why Eleanor? That's where the victim's affairs come in, I suggested, the pieces starting to click into a disturbing whole. The business dealings, any potential conflicts with the Croft family's interests. The victim was a tech entrepreneur, right? Disruptive by nature. Did he have any dealings with historical properties, or perhaps intellectual property that might clash with a traditional family business? Miller nodded, already opening another file. He was in the process of acquiring a substantial portfolio of historical patents. Some of them related to early mechanical innovations, even some antique-level craftsmanship. Things that could be quite valuable if modernized or replicated with current tech. He was looking to monetize history in a way. My gut tightened. And if Eleanor's family felt he was encroaching on their legacy or threatening their livelihood by devaluing the very artistry they preserved. The detective's gaze met mine, a flicker of grim understanding passing between us. That's a strong motive, Marcus. But we need more than a custom tool and a potential conflict of interest. We need a direct link, something concrete. Then we start digging into those patents, I said, pushing back from the desk, and into the victim's financial dealings, particularly anything that might have involved the Croft family directly or indirectly. There might be something hidden, something he was trying to protect or acquire that would be stored off-site. Off-site? Miller repeated, already on his feet, reaching for his coat. Sensitive documents, high-value assets, things you wouldn't keep in a standard office, I explained. Things that might be filed away in an obscure, secure location. Our next stop was an address listed in the victim's digital calendar, one he'd visited frequently in the months leading up to his death. It led us to a nondescript building on the waterfront, its smoked glass windows reflecting the gray sky. The sign above the reception desk read, Global Assets and Holdings. The air was cool, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive paper. Every corner seemed designed for discretion, every surface polished to a mirror sheen. If the victim had a secret, a leverage point, or a deep-seated fear, it would be housed in a place like this. And if Eleanor Croft had a motive that went beyond a simple family legacy, the records here might just reveal it. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent hum beneath the polished veneer of legality. Every surface gleamed, reflecting the stark overhead lighting. The faint scent of ozone I'd noticed earlier was sharper here, mingled with the dry, papery smell of countless legal histories. This wasn't a place for secrets to be shouted, but for them to be meticulously filed away, then, if necessary, quietly shredded. He'd been expecting me, though his posture suggested he wished I hadn't come. Marcus Finch, he acknowledged, his voice as smooth and unyielding as the marble floor. We've prepared the requested financial disclosures for Mr. Croft's estate. He gestured to a slim folder, resting conspicuously alone on the vast table. I didn't move towards it. My gaze swept past the folder, past the solicitor, taking in the room. A bank of floor-to-ceiling safes lined one wall, their steel doors gleaming. Near them, 2 industrial-grade shred bins, each large enough to swallow a small tree, hummed with a low, almost imperceptible thrum. They looked well used. I appreciate the promptness, I said, my voice deliberately calm. But my interest extends beyond the immediate financial assets. I'm looking for anything that might shed light on the early days of Croft's empire. Partnership agreements, initial venture capital contracts, even internal memos from the founding period. I watched his eyes for any flicker. There was none, only a slight tightening around his mouth. Those documents would be highly confidential, Doctor. Finch, and largely irrelevant to the circumstances of Mr. Croft's unfortunate demise. His tone was polite but firm, a clear barrier. Perhaps, I conceded, stepping closer to the wall of safes. Each one was labeled with a small, discreet plaque. Most were recent, gleaming. But towards the end, tucked almost out of sight behind a potted plant, was an older safe. Its brass hinges showed a slight patina, and the steel had a duller, more worn finish. No label. "And what about these?" I asked, my finger tracing the cool metal of the unlabeled safe. The solicitor cleared his throat. "That particular unit contains older, archived materials, mostly superseded agreements, dormant accounts. Nothing of current relevance." "Relevance is subjective," I countered, turning to face him fully. "An investigation into a death of this nature often requires a deep dive into historical context, especially when the circumstances of the death suggest something far more intricate than an accident." I let the implication hang in the sterile air. He knew what I was suggesting. He knew what my work entailed. He sighed, a barely audible expulsion of breath. "I'm afraid I do not have the authorization to grant access to those archived files without a specific court order detailing the exact documents required." "And I'm afraid," I said, my voice dropping slightly, "that delaying an investigation into a potential homicide is a far more serious matter than breaching a confidentiality clause. Consider this a preliminary request. I can return with the full weight of a subpoena, but that will mean involving more people, creating more paperwork, and undoubtedly drawing more public attention to this office and its clients. I imagine discretion is a high priority here." He held my gaze for a long moment, weighing his options. The threat of public scrutiny, of a messy legal battle, was clearly a potent deterrent in this sanctuary of secrecy. Finally, with another almost imperceptible sigh, he walked over to a secure cabinet, retrieved a heavy brass key, and returned to the older safe. The tumblers clicked with a satisfying series of thuds as he worked the combination. The door swung open, revealing rows of neatly stacked, yellowing files. "You have 30 minutes, he stated, stepping back and consulting his watch. "I will remain present." I nodded, already reaching for the first box. The files inside were dense, heavy with the weight of forgotten histories. Early incorporation papers, patent applications, venture capital pitches from before Croft's name became synonymous with innovation. I bypassed the obvious, the documents that would have been scrubbed clean and updated. I was looking for anomalies, for signatures that disappeared, for names that faded. It took me 20 minutes, sifting through layers of corporate jargon and legal fine print to find it. Tucked away at the bottom of a box labeled Initial Shareholder Agreements, 2008, was a folder. It was thinner than the others, almost overlooked. Inside, a faded memorandum of understanding, dated over 15 years ago. It detailed the formation of what would become Croft's multi-billion-dollar enterprise. And there, listed alongside Croft's name, was another, Eleanor Vance. Not just an early employee, not just a minor contributor. The document explicitly stated founding partner and detailed an equal split of initial equity. 50% to Croft, 50% to Eleanor Vance. My eyes scanned further. Patent applications followed, many listing both their names as co-inventors. Early project proposals, brainstorming notes, even a handwritten mission statement, all bearing Eleanor's precise, elegant script alongside Croft's bolder, sprawling hand. This wasn't an estranged wife who merely benefited from her husband's success. This was a brilliant mind, a true co-founder, systematically erased from the official narrative. Then a final, terse separation agreement, where she relinquished all claims for a sum that, while substantial at the time, was a paltry fraction of the empire he had helped build. Her signature on that last document looked shaky, almost forced. The implications hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just professional betrayal. It was a calculated, brutal act of personal and intellectual erasure. To have your life's work stolen, your contribution systematically scrubbed from history by the very person you built it with. The motive bloomed in my mind, stark and undeniable. This wasn't a simple fall or a business deal gone wrong. This was a deep-seated grievance, a wound festering for years, finally erupting. Eleanor Vance, the estranged wife, was not who she seemed. He was the ghost in the machine, and now I understood why she might want to bring the whole edifice down. I carefully placed the documents back, making a mental note of their exact location. I met his gaze, my own now sharpened with a new, dangerous clarity. He had no idea what I had just unearthed, but I did, and it changed everything. I bypassed the obvious, the documents that would have detailed the recent history of the company, the public-facing narrative. My fingers brushed against the brittle edges of early incorporation papers, patent applications, venture capital pitches from before Croft's name became synonymous with innovation. This wasn't about the victim's recent triumphs. It was about the roots, the forgotten foundations. Dust motes danced in the anemic light filtering through the high, barred windows, illuminating the quiet industry of my search. The air itself felt heavy, thick with the scent of aged paper and latent secrets. I worked methodically, pulling boxes, scanning contents, dismissing entire decades in minutes until a specific set of blueprints caught my eye. Not the sleek, modern schematics of the current facility, but an early iteration, a preliminary design from nearly 2 decades prior. It was crude by today's standards, but the core structure, the very skeleton of the building where Croft met his end, was recognizable. I spread the large, yellowed sheets across a cleared table, careful not to tear the fragile paper. My gaze tracked the lines, the annotations in an unfamiliar hand. Then I saw it. A section of the facility, marked with a specific, almost archaic symbol, denoting a specialized piece of infrastructure. It was a counterweight system, designed for heavy lifting in the early days, before automation streamlined much of the process. Redundant now, I imagined, likely decommissioned or repurposed, but still physically present. A chill snaked up my spine, a cold premonition that had nothing to do with the cool air of the archive. I recalled the microfractures on Croft's bones, the specific localized trauma that had always defied the simple narrative of a fall. A fall would have created diffuse impact points, broader damage. These were precise, almost surgical in their execution. My mind replayed the scene, the angle of impact, the trajectory. The counterweight system. It wasn't just a piece of equipment, it was a potential mechanism. I needed more. I pushed further into the archives, my focus sharpened by this new lead. The colleague who had escorted me here, a silent, watchful presence, offered no comment as I moved with renewed purpose. I found an old maintenance log, bound in a fraying leather cover, detailing the decommissioning of that specific counterweight system. The entries were sparse, but one detail stood out. A specific tool, a heavy, specialized wrench, designed for the system's unique fasteners, was listed as retained for emergency maintenance, even after the system was mothballed. It was a relic, likely stored in an obscure corner, forgotten by most, but not by all. This wasn't just about a tool, it was about intimate knowledge. Who would know about a decommissioned counterweight, a retained wrench, an obscure corner of a decades-old facility? Someone with deep historical ties? Someone who had been there from the very beginning, or had access to every dusty corner of its past? My hands trembled slightly as I pulled a box labeled Legal Correspondence, Early Ventures. Inside, nestled amongst legal briefs and shareholder agreements, were personal letters, interoffice memos, and even some handwritten notes. They detailed the initial struggles, the triumphs, the very personal investments of the early team. And there, weaving through the narrative, was Eleanor's name. Not as a recent hire, but as a foundational partner, an architect of the very concept, deeply involved in the initial design and construction of the facility. Her involvement predated Croft's rise to prominence, stretching back to the blueprints I'd just examined. She knew the facility, not just as an employee, but as its co-creator. Every pipe, every beam, every hidden recess. The pieces slammed together with a sickening clarity. Eleanor hadn't just been Croft's colleague. He had helped build his empire, literally. She knew the original plans, the modifications, the forgotten corners, the retained tools. She knew the facility like the back of her hand. I could see it now, the calculated precision. He would have known Croft's routine, his specific path through the facility. He would have known the blind spots, the brief windows of opportunity, the specialized wrench, heavy, dense, capable of delivering a concentrated impact. Not a fall, but a deliberate strike, timed to perfection, aimed at the precise points that would mimic a catastrophic accident. The body then positioned, meticulously, to suggest the fall, the struggle, the tragic mishap. He would have known exactly where to leave it, where the security cameras had blind spots, where the noise of the machinery would mask any sound. The staging. It wasn't an improvisation. It was a performance, rehearsed in her mind, executed with chilling efficiency. She didn't just kill him. She engineered his death, turning the very environment he had built into an accomplice. The initial trauma, the critical blow from the specialized tool, then the careful positioning to make it appear as if the fall itself was the cause of death. The fractures I'd found, so specific, so localized, weren't from a tumble. They were from a targeted impact, delivered with the leverage and weight of a tool designed for heavy mechanics, not human bone. My breath hitched. Eleanor. She wasn't just a suspect. He was the architect of this deception. The accident was a masterpiece of misdirection, designed to fool everyone but the bones themselves. I carefully refolded the blueprint, placed the maintenance log back in its cover, and gathered the relevant correspondence. The weight of these documents in my hands felt immense, heavier than any bone I'd ever examined. The case was no longer just about forensic anomalies. It was about a deeply personal betrayal, a murder hidden in plain sight, woven into the very fabric of the victim's life and work. I had the timeline, the motive, and now, the method. I had the killer. My jaw tightened. It was time to build the scaffold for her truth. My fingers, still gritty from the dust of decades, traced the handwritten ledger entries. This wasn't a corporate record. It was a personal account, meticulously kept, detailing intellectual property transfers, patent applications quietly shelved, and financial allocations that evaporated into shell corporations. The dates aligned perfectly with the victim's career trajectory, a period marked by his meteoric rise and the quiet, almost invisible decline of Eleanor's professional contributions. The final entry, a single line detailing the transfer of a key patent, bore Eleanor's signature, almost hidden beneath the victim's sprawling, triumphant one. It was the last piece, the motive, the betrayal etched in ink. I closed the ledger, a cold certainty settling in my gut. This was it. The air felt heavy, charged with unspoken expectations. The polished mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lighting, reflecting the grim faces gathered around it. The lead detective, a man whose patience I'd tested repeatedly, sat opposite me, his gaze watchful. Eleanor was there too, perched on the edge of her seat, her posture rigid, a forced composure clinging to her like a thin veneer. "Thank you for coming, Eleanor," I began, my voice steady, betraying none of the tension coiling in my stomach. I pushed a series of enlarged photographs across the table towards her. They depicted the victim's skeletal remains, annotated with precise measurements and highlighted fracture patterns. I've had time to process the entirety of the forensic data. What we initially believed to be an accident, a fall from height, is far more complex. Eleanor's eyes flickered across the images, a tremor running through her hands as she clasped them tightly in her lap. "I don't understand, Marcus. The authorities confirmed it was an accident, a tragic fall." Her voice, though strained, held a practiced firmness. "The authorities, based on initial observations, did," I conceded, my gaze unwavering. "But initial observations can be misleading. My examination revealed a specific pattern of fractures, perimortem, meaning around the time of death, that are inconsistent with a simple, uncontrolled fall. I tapped a specific point on one of the photos, a hairline fracture on the temporal bone, almost imperceptible without magnification. This, for instance, a fall from that height onto a hard surface would typically result in a much broader impact pattern or a comminuted fracture. This, however, suggests a focused, blunt force trauma. I paused, letting the weight of the words settle. The detective shifted, leaning forward slightly. And the cervical vertebrae, I continued, pointing to another image. The angulation of the C1 and C2 fractures, combined with the absence of typical whiplash trauma, indicates a rotational force, not a direct vertical compression. It speaks to a swift, violent twist, delivered with considerable intent. I then pushed forward a 3D printed replica of the victim's skull, highlighting the specific areas of trauma with red markers. Imagine the victim, already disoriented, perhaps incapacitated. The initial impact, a sharp blow to the side of the head, causing this fracture. My finger traced the line. Then, a rapid, forceful rotation of the head and neck, snapping the upper cervical spine. Eleanor flinched, her carefully constructed facade cracking. No, that's impossible. Who would do such a thing? Her voice was barely a whisper. Someone who knew his vulnerabilities, I stated, my voice hardening. Someone who knew how to incapacitate him quickly, quietly. Someone who understood human anatomy, perhaps through years of working alongside him, observing his habits, his physical responses. I then presented the detailed reconstruction. A timeline, compiled from various data points. The victim's final calls, security footage anomalies, the precise time of death extrapolated from insect activity and body temperature. The fall, I explained, was staged. He was already deceased, or close to it, before he went over the railing. The body was positioned to mimic an accidental tumble, but the underlying injuries tell a different story. The absence of defensive wounds, the specific nature of the trauma, it all points to a calculated act, not a struggle. I laid the dusty ledger from the archived boxes on the table, pushing it towards Eleanor. Its worn cover seemed to glow ominously under the conference room lights. This ledger, documenting years of intellectual property transfers, quietly shifting ownership, diminishing your contributions while elevating his. The final entry, a patent for the neural interface technology that made him a billionaire, bears your signature. Subtly, almost invisibly, overshadowed by his own. Her eyes, wide with a raw, exposed fear, fixated on the ledger. Her composure shattered completely. The forced rigidity dissolved, replaced by a trembling vulnerability. He took everything, she choked out, her voice breaking. My ideas, my work, my life's work. He just erased me, bit by bit. He promised partnership, equality, but he just kept taking. He was going to sell the company, take all the credit, leave me with nothing but a footnote in his legacy. Her confession poured out, a torrent of suppressed anger and despair. I confronted him, in the laboratory. He just laughed, Marcus, laughed at me, said I was insignificant, said no one would ever believe me. She lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed but blazing with a furious pain. I didn't mean to. Not at first. I just wanted him to listen, to acknowledge. He pushed me. He always pushed me. And then, I saw the wrench, just there, on the workbench, and I just reacted. Her gaze dropped to the ledger, then back to the 3D skull, the red mark stark against the white bone. He fell. I didn't throw him, I just pushed him over the railing. After. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. The detective rose slowly, moving towards Eleanor, his expression grim. The bones had spoken, and their truth, as it often did, was a devastating testament to human desperation. The words had indeed hung, a shroud descending over the quiet room. The detective's movements, slow and deliberate as he approached Eleanor, spoke volumes without a single uttered sound. My own chest felt hollowed. But even in that quiet devastation, a forensic anthropologist's mind rarely ceased its relentless pursuit of truth. The air was thick with it, a palpable hum that vibrated beneath my shoes as I walked the hushed corridors. It wasn't the raw, visceral tension of a fresh crime scene, but the colder, more insidious anxiety of secrets about to be exposed. The detective had summoned me, not for more bone analysis, but to witness the culmination of his parallel investigation. He knew my findings had been the fulcrum, the precise point where the weight of the accident narrative had tipped into outright murder. Now, he needed me to see the full architecture of the deception, to understand how a mind, driven to such extremes, had meticulously built its alibi. The office itself was a testament to discretion. No names on doors, only numbers. The reception area was sparsely furnished, dominated by a large abstract sculpture that seemed to absorb all sound. We were led to a conference room, stark and bright, where a solicitor sat, his face a carefully neutral mask. On the table, already spread out, were files, ledgers, and a single sealed envelope. "Marcus," the detective began, his voice low. "We've located the financial instruments. Hidden trusts, shell corporations, all tied to Alan Croft's more speculative ventures." He gestured to the solicitor, who nodded curtly. "Mr. Croft had a complex financial portfolio," the solicitor stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "Much of it highly leveraged and, shall we say, volatile." He pushed a document towards me, a dense printout of transactions and offshore accounts. My eyes, accustomed to the elegant simplicity of skeletal structures, struggled with the labyrinthine figures. "Eleanor," the detective continued, stepping closer to the table, "was not just his business partner. He was also the executor of his primary estate and deeply entwined in these speculative ventures." He picked up the sealed envelope. This was found in her private safe at the Croft estate. An unsigned letter, a contingency plan. My gaze fixed on the envelope. A contingency plan. The words echoed the calculated precision I'd seen in the bone trauma. This wasn't a sudden, desperate act. This was a blueprint. The detective slit the envelope with a letter opener. He unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It was typed, no handwritten flourishes to betray emotion. He began to read aloud, his voice gaining a grim cadence. "Should unforeseen circumstances arise regarding Alan's liabilities, measures are in place to ensure the integrity of the core holdings. The appearance of a tragic accident must be maintained. Dr. Finch's reputation for meticulousness is both a challenge and an opportunity. His initial findings, if focused on the height of the fall, will confirm the narrative. Any deeper inquiry must be my reputation, my meticulousness. It wasn't just a cover-up. It was a perversion of my own field, an attempt to weaponize forensic science against itself. The casual mention of managing any deeper inquiry sent a shiver down my spine, suggesting a layer of ruthlessness that went far beyond the act itself. The detective laid the letter on the table. Alan Croft was on the verge of financial ruin. His empire, built on audacious risks, was crumbling. Eleanor, as his partner and closest confidant, knew the full extent of the collapse. His death, made to look like an industrial accident, secured a massive payout that would save what remained of his legitimate businesses. The bone fractures, the precise, almost surgical application of force, suddenly made sickening sense. It wasn't just about making him fall. It was about ensuring the story of the fall was irrefutable, designed to withstand initial scrutiny, using the very details I would seek to establish the how of his death. The subtle trauma I'd found, inconsistent with a simple plummet, was the crack in her meticulously constructed facade. He had accounted for the general, but not the specific, the forensic specific. The solicitor cleared his throat. With Mr. Croft's death ruled accidental, the insurance claims were processed. The remaining assets, now bolstered by the payout, have been restructured. Eleanor ensured the legacy, as she saw it, was preserved. Preserved. The word felt tainted. I spent another hour poring over the files, the numbers blurring into a grim testament to avarice and fear. The locked safes, I imagined, still held other secrets, but the essential truth had been extracted. Later, walking out into the sharp, clean air of the city, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not joy, never joy in such circumstances, but the deep, resonant calm that came when a narrative, however grim, finally resolved itself. The bones had spoken of trauma, of a struggle. Now the documents in the offshore law office with shred bins and locked safes had given those bones a voice, explaining the complex, desperate human motivations behind the violence. Her loyalty, her dedication to Alan Croft's legacy, had twisted into something monstrous. My work was done. The truth, meticulously chipped away from bone and paper, stood stark and undeniable. I was a quiet witness to the hidden narratives etched into the human frame, a translator of the past for the sake of the present. The ache in my chest had subsided, replaced by the familiar, resolute determination that fueled my purpose. The bones always told a story. My role was simply to listen,